Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Where our topic for today is credential readiness. We have a series of these webinars, and we've invited solution providers that have implemented credentials. And today we have Marc Blekkink from Movilitas.Cloud, and I'll introduce Marc in a second. Before we get started, I just wanted to advise everyone of our antitrust caution, in that we don't talk about pricing, sales terms, territories, refusal to deal, anything of that nature. If you feel like we're getting into those kind of areas, please say so, and we'll table that conversation until we speak to counsel. So I want to talk a little bit about our speaker today, some resources that are available to us from a DSCSA perspective, some of the issues that surround the enhanced drug distribution security system from an authentication and authorization point of view, and then Marc will give his perspective on all of this, and also do a little bit of a demo, which would be very interesting to actually see some of this actually executed. So today we've got Marc Blekkink, from Managing Director of Movilitas.Cloud. Marc, thanks for joining us today. Marc has a chemical engineering background, specializing in control technology. And I didn't realize, Marc, all the things you've been doing. Worked in manufacturing plants as automation engineer, focused on DCS and PCL systems. Worked on shop floor systems. And as an entrepreneur, he started in the field of data historians, neural networks, and now I understand why you like some of the simulations that we've been doing together. Manufacturing operations, manufacturing platform, and as the founder of Movilitas.Cloud, is now heavily involved in the development and further expansion of Movilitas.Cloud and Movilitas Mobile to build a platform to let the stakeholders work together on tracing products and be compliant with global legislations for medicines. Marc, thanks for being with us today. So just a few resources that everyone should be aware of. And that is from the perspective of OCI and a lot of the work that's being done around DSCSA and compliance. PDG has a number of resources within their blueprint that deals with an overall requirements around DSCSA, TI, transaction information exchange, verification of product, tracing of product, and also credentialing. Of course, a lot of this is all based on GS1 standards for healthcare and for DSCSA. HTA has also developed all of the specifications, requirements, and design for the verification routing service. And then within OCI, we've been busy developing the open credentials for doing authentication and authorization in systems such as DSCSA, EDDS. So just some of the challenges. Now, I've been at this tracing game now for 20 years, starting back when it was Florida and California Board of Pharmacies, and now the FDA DSCSA regulations. And one of the things that we didn't realize was what would take place during tracing and verification between trading partners. What I mean is that in almost every transaction or interaction between trading partners, it's done between unique trading partner pairs. So you see here, trading partner 1 and 2 have gone through an authentication and authorization process of their own, a know your customer, know your supplier process, and they know each other. They build pipelines, data pipelines between each other, and start to exchange your typical business transactions through those pipelines. When we look at DSCSA, there's some unique areas around this. We certainly have transaction information, transaction statement exchange, and that is between those same known trading partners. However, when we get to two of the other areas within DSCSA, most notably product information verification and also transaction information tracing, you'll notice all those blue lines are not only between adjacent trading partners, but also non-adjacent trading partners. And this is where the rub is. This is where we don't have, where if you receive a verification request or a trace request from another trading partner, you may not necessarily know who they are or whether they are actually are that individual trading partner. And so this is where the OCI specifications come in play in being able to provide credentials between trading partners so that these authentication and authorization can take place not only between adjacent trading partners, but also non-adjacent trading partners and even DSCSA authorities. We do have some resources on authentication and authorization and how that works within the DSCSA EDDS, both with using credentials and also using your own maybe proprietary or manual process once you either receive a request for either verification if you're a manufacturer or a repackager, or for tracing if you're anyone in the supply chain. And also if you've received data from another trading partner. We align ourselves with, from OCI perspective, with PDG, and there's some interesting work being done within PDG around validation matrix. And this is where we see the connection between DSCSA requirements, and in this case, the authentication, authorization, or the credentialing architecture that's been built through OCI, the open credentials. And that's how we stay in alignment with the overall industry business requirements. The same thing takes place within HDA, GS1, and other organizations that have been building specification standards for the use in DSCSA. So that's just a general thoughts around some of the uniqueness around DSCSA from an authentication authorization purpose. It's probably the only interaction between businesses that I know of. I've been searching for another example. I can't come up with one where there is almost an ad hoc nature of it, especially within verification and tracing, where a non-adjacent trading partner or even an adjacent trading partner is requesting information, and you may not know exactly who they are and whether they are authorized to have that data. And so that's the uniqueness around DSCSA and the use, in this case, of credentials to provide for that authentication and authorization. What I'd like to do now is turn this over to Marc to talk about what Movilitas.Cloud has been doing, how they've been working with credentialing and within VRS and also for tracing. And then Marc's willing to give us a little bit of a demonstration of what they've been doing. So Marc, okay. I'll turn this over to you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the introduction. You want me to take over the slides also, or do you just move the slides forward?
I'll move the slides and then you can take over it during the demo.
That's fine. So if you go to the next slide, we give a little bit an overview about Movilitas.Cloud. So Movilitas.Cloud is, as the name implies, a cloud platform, a software as a service, multi-tenant, and it actually supports pharmaceutical companies to be compliant with legislation, including the DSCSA in the US. The two main components we talk about is serialized manufacturing, which is all about packaging and serialization, aggregation, and the second application, serialized logistics, is all about shipping and receiving. We also provide some repackaging functionality, and actually depending where you are in the supply chain, you need both applications or you need only the serialized logistics if you're a distributor or a wholesaler. If you take a look at the next slide, when it comes to DSCSA, the two main applications, as I already said, is serialized manufacturing and serialized logistics. In serialized manufacturing, as I said, we talk all about serialization, aggregation, shop floor integration with MEHs and CMOs. When it comes to verification, these are typically the responders. So if you take a look at a verification request, it's routed to the company that put the product on the market, and they actually need to respond. And Movilitas.Cloud can be used there to be a VRS responder. Another very important piece is, if you talk about verification requests, is that there is something called a lookup directory. Because we say that, as you saw in the presentation from Bob already, I mean, if you do a request, you need to route it. That is where the name verification routing service comes from. You need to route it to the company that can actually provide you a response. And that is, for that, we need to have a so-called lookup directory. And in the lookup directory, you scan the GTIN and convert it to an endpoint, which is actually pointing to the responder. Well, we are also a lookup directory. So that means that in serialized manufacturing, you can register a GTIN to the lookup directory. And because of the structure of a lookup directory, that gets propagated to all the other LD providers. What is also important is that the authorized trading partner generation to prove who you are when you receive, first of all, when you receive a request, you like to verify where the verification request is coming from. But secondly, when you respond, you also like to provide your credentials saying who you are. So we have completely integrated the ATP generation and verification, and we do it for the two providers available in the market, Sverity with Caro and Legilume with XATP. Serialized logistics is actually mainly used for inbound and outbound. Why is that so important? Well, that is the module that allows you to, first of all, receive EPCS messages and confirm that what you received is in line with what you physically receive. And at the same time, you can scan everything that you ship. And at that moment, it generates the TITS EPCS message for your clients. If you go to the next slide, what we want to show on this slide is actually how easy it is to actually receive the information from your suppliers. Yeah. Of course, everybody can use Movilitas.Cloud, but that would not be very realistic to expect that. But if you look at the major players in the market, we are connected to SAP ICH. That is a fixed connection, so that is a very quick setup. SFTP from TraceLink, that is a standard connection that can be set up by our connectors. RFXL is using our SFTP server. LSpedia, we are connected to an SFTP server from them. We have an AS2 server that can be used. We have an API. Systec, for example, is using that so that you can send the EPCS straight to an API. Or if you need to download it from a portal, you can upload it into our system onto your supplier. Yeah? Why is this important? Well, this information you need. First of all, you need it before you can receive the goods. Secondly, you need it to be able to verify that what you received is in line with what the file actually says. If not, it generates an exception, another part we work on. But it is also important to be able to respond to a TI request, a TI trace request, which you will see. On the next slide, we show a little bit how the verification works. So verification can be done with a mobile device. There is a component called Movilitas Mobile. You can download that from the app stores. If you use an iPhone, you go to the App Store. If you use an Android device, you go to Google Play. You download Movilitas Mobile and you can start using it. Nice thing is, it's very simple. You use product verification. That is the app. You select the reason why you need to do the verification. You actually tell if your product is in your possession, yes or no, because that is one of the new requirements from version 1.3. And then you can actually scan packs, or you can scan multiple packs. If you scan a pack, you activate the camera. If you have actually an industrial device, you can also activate the laser beam. And there's also an option to use matrix scanning. With matrix scanning, what you do, you see that on the left bottom, you actually use the camera, and everything that the camera sees will actually be scanned. And at that moment, you can do the verification. On item number 5, you can actually see 2 dots on the left side. The green dot means that the verification is okay. The dot on the right side actually tells you if the ATP credentials of the responder is actually okay. And you see the bottom one is green. That means that you verify the pack that is okay, and also you receive credentials back from a trusted source. And then actually, if you move it to the left and you click on the details, you can see the pack you scanned that was scanned. You can also see the data that was communicated, like a phone number or an email that you can contact. And we actually show you who the responder was. And so you can actually see all the details of the responder. If you use a browser, there is also a possibility that you can just plug in an USB scanner, or you can use a Bluetooth scanner, and then you can use a browser, and that looks exactly the same. In the demo, I will also use a browser because it's easier to show it. The last slide, we show actually the trace possibilities. So that is on the next slide. So tracing, so this is a project that's going on at the moment. What we have available today, we already have a tracing UI. You see it on the right side. So the user always has the possibility to enter a GTIN, enter a serial number, and what we show at that moment, we show the US data, if it is, of course, a product that was for the US. So the data from the US means we show the national drug code and all the other details. And based on what is actually received or shipped, we can actually show the transaction data. So what you see here is that the data from the supplier, you see the transaction that was involved, you see in which warehouse you received it. And in this case, you can also see that you shipped it again to which client, and you can see the transaction. Of course, if it is a more complex one, you can see more complex data. We also have an endpoint that is already available. There is a link to the support portal where it shows how you can use it. So you can shoot this same request to an API endpoint, but that is only accessible if the tenant actually provides you the details of the endpoint and provides you the credentials to access the endpoint. We also have an email address that can be used for testing. So if you send an email to that email address, the system will pick it up and the system will actually automatically accept it, and then actually it continues the same way. And we have a trace request application. So the same application that can be used for verification can also be used for doing a request. What is currently in development is an open responder. And what do we mean with an open responder is that, as Bob already showed, a trace request can be moved from ATP to ATP. And that can actually go to a lot of ATPs. So at that moment, what we need is an open responder, so that if we have the information from a particular trace request, it can be sent to us and we can actually respond. The integration of ATP is also actually included in this one. The beautiful thing is that we already had it included in the verification, so it's just a matter of extending that to the trace request. And the market is still discussing about how do you determine where you're going to send it to. Yeah, you know that for the lookup directory, we had actually a conversion for a GTIN to an endpoint. Well, maybe we need to have a GLN lookup directory. We're working also with Pulse, that is the system from the NABP, because they actually have a contact database with all the ATPs in the US, and we're trying to see if that can maybe be used. Yeah. Bottom line should be that at the end, we can provide you with a complete solution to doing this. So let's move over a little bit to the product itself. So let me see if I can share my screen.
There we go.
Yeah. So what we see here is actually the admin UI. And I need to go a little bit faster given the time, but what we have in here is first of all the serialized manufacturing application. As I said, that one is important because it contains all the GTINs, all the serial numbers that I produced. And when for the US market, for the USA, then you actually get a DSCSA tab. And in the DSCSA tab, you can actually specify your responder GLN, or you can use the default. You can specify the verification endpoint. This is our endpoint. You can specify the details to enter it to the lookup directory. And if you have one that is not added, you can fill out all the details. A button shows up at the lookup directory. When I click on that, it's automatically added to the lookup directory. It's streamed to the other LDs, and then everything works. Yeah. You see also some things like provide no reason in case of product identifier mismatch, manufacturing policy. All these things can be set up. When it comes to ATP, you actually can specify on the USA market, you can actually specify if you want to enable verifiable credentials. At this moment, it's turned off. That means we respond, but we do not respond if the product is not in the possession of the requester, and the verifiable credentials are not enabled. If I enable it, then I can actually say, well, I want to add the verifiable credentials. I can actually add my provider, so I can say it's Caro or XATP. Depending on what I select, I can fill in the details and it works. For Caro, we also have the possibility to create a tenant. So if you click on this button, and I would say yes, which I'm not going to do, it actually triggers a request in the Caro system and the whole process starts. So that is for the responder point of view. If you take a look at the product verification and tracing application, then you can also set the settings here. So here the credentials are enabled, and then actually I can select the identifier. So here you see an example where I have here a Caro identifier. So I gave it a label, I put in the DIT. If I want to use XATP, then I can actually select that one and I fill out the API key, the label, and the DIT. So I can use both of them. At the moment it is actually enabled. That means that I can specify the operators. At this moment, it's myself. I can specify a phone number, and then I can actually log into my mobile device. And if I log into my mobile device, I can select a reason for verification. I can say I can scan one pack or I can scan multiple packs. I just need to turn my keyboard to the US because I'm using a USB scanner, and then I can actually start scanning some of the data. So if I scan some packs, so I just have some codes here that I can scan, and you can see that it ignores the double scans. So I had a couple of double scans, so I ignored it. And here you see an example that the data was correct and ATP responded. If I click on preview, I can actually see the serial number I scanned. I can see the responder GLN. I can see the ATP verification response converted into some readable data, and I can see the contact information. So that is how the verification works. If you take a look at the TI trace request, then I can actually use the same, and this I can also use on my mobile device. So I can say, okay, what is the response type? I like to know the TI information, or I like to know all the known owners or the less known owner. I can select whatever I want. I can say, what is the investigation reason? Why do I do it? I can specify the circumstances. So I can put whatever I want there. It's still set to the US, but it doesn't matter. I can specify the 3911 if I have that. I can say how deep do I like to go. So do I want to go all the way to the patient, to the pharmacy, or to the wholesale distributor? So I can specify that. And I can say, what do I like to recall? Is it the serial number or the lot number? If I do it on serial number basis, I can confirm, and then I can scan one or multiple products. At that moment, I can send the request, and the trace request is being sent. How can I see that? Well, there is also the reports and analysis. I have a DSCSA. First of all, I can see the request that I send out. So here you see the request that I sent, and you can see the information that was also presented in the mobile. So everything is being stored and you can search. But at the same time, for the trace request, I can also see the trace request that was created. So this is the trace request that was created. I can download it, or I can actually mail it. So I can mail it to myself if I want to. If I would mail it, let me put it back to Belgian keyboard. Then I actually should get an email. There is the email. And if I just copy how it looks like, I can just show you the screen capture, because that is the quickest way of showing it. Disappeared, of course. And this is then the email that they will receive. So you see the email, I just received it. Attached is actually the JSON that is required, and there is a mail, and we can extend this with some more information, but that is pretty much how it works. Of course, I can also download the JSON and store it. And if I would update it, I can see that actually the mail was just sent at this time. Okay, I think that is it for the demo, given the time we have. So back to you, Bob, to see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Marc. So I'll open it up to the audience. If there's anyone that has a question for Marc. Oops. Sorry about that. That was. Marc, when you were doing the trace request, and then you sent the email out, in there would be the credential that would go in there so that the responder would be able to verify who you are.
Yeah, at the moment it is not added because the market is not that far in the testing.
Sure.
So at the moment it is without the credentials, but in the JSON there is a field available where you can actually put in the verifiable credentials, and then the other side is able to verify it. And if you send a request to our email, because we don't read the email, we just process the attachment immediately, and then it will show up in the same list because the request comes in at that moment when you have specified that you want to verify the credentials, then we actually verify it. And if it is, if you get a negative response, the trace request is just ignored. And of course, we don't send any email back that we ignore it because that would not be used.
Right. So if you have a trace request inbound for a customer, that customer would be able to go into the system, look at what the request is, look at if there is a credential there, look at that it's been verified or not, and then make their decision as to what to do next, to either use contact information maybe or what have you to take the next steps. Or to your point, if things are not looking well, then they may decide not to interact at all.
It will actually execute the request immediately, and then it's up to the user on the settings. Do they first like to review before the response is sent, or do they say, well, the system can just automatically send the response?
Okay. And in verification, that's set up today as being synchronous, right? So a user of the system then would be able to look in later if let's just say they had not set it as requiring a credential, but let's say some came in as credentialed, then they'd be able to look in to see sort of a history and take a look at whether those, as we're talking about this kind of transition period, they can take a look at what they've received and responded to in the past and verify those credentials just to see what kind of experience they're getting from them.
Yeah, I mean, everything that is happening is stored in the system forever.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always able to have a record. And for trace requests, that is very important, because if I execute a trace request, it can mean that I can maybe get 10 answers on one request, depending on the depth that I have, because I do a request to one and they say, well, we bought it from you and we shipped it there, and then I need to send the next request to that company till I finally reach my my endpoint. But it is still
Okay.
one request, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Or?
It does. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to put the QA up there. Are there any questions from the viewers, the audience? Okay,
Either
so
it was clear or we put everybody to sleep.
I think it's one of those things where it was very dense what we were looking at. I think so. We have recorded it, and we'll provide the recording to folks. Marc, we may have questions for you afterwards as everybody kind of looks over that and digest what you showed, and not only the process, but from a user point of view, what they may see and what may be available to them. So we may ask you back for a later QA as questions kind of come in on how it all worked together, how it all fit together. So it was kind of interesting how you were providing those red-green check marks, and really that's really what an end user wants to see. Can I move forward? Is there an area of concern that I need to look more into, especially when we're talking about trace requests where an end user may be involving more of their company, different departments within their company, in order to come together and decide how to respond and what to respond with.
Yeah, and also the proof that if there's ever an audit, like, hey, you resold this, that you actually verified it, that you can prove, like, yes, because at this time, and that was the answer I got. So if there's any discussion about, but the product was suspect, why did you sold it? That you say, but at the moment I scanned it, it was not suspect. So you cannot.
Right. Yeah, having those audit records behind not only receipt and response of either verification or tracing, but also the credential checks if they're available. Good. Well, Marc, thanks for taking the time today to present.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
And I'll probably reach out to you as we receive either questions or comments we may come back at another point in time to address some more finer points on this. But thanks for your presentation, and thanks everyone for joining today. We will put up the recording, and we have a series actually of these where solution providers have implemented verification, tracing, and credentialing together, and how that works and some of their experiences and perspective around that. Thank you, everyone. We'll close the call now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.